Well, it is your top story here and around the world. It's just hours after the first U.S. presidential debate, and already so much has been said. It's the first of 3 planned debates between U.S. President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee, that's Joe Biden, and it was hosted in Ohio in the U.S. this morning our time anyway. That debate featured clear differences between the two contenders on policy issues, including the COVID-19 pandemic, the Supreme Court, the economy, race, violence in American cities, and of course the integrity of the election. Let's unpack the debate now. Joining us here in studio is Dr. Bob Wekesa and Professor Gilbert Khadiagala. They're both from the African Center for the Study of the U.S. at Wits University. Gentlemen, you've been with me since 3 a.m. this morning here on Channel 405. Thank you so much for staying with us on the AM report as well. The question that's emerging now, as it always does in the wake of these presidential debates, is who came out on top? Professor Khadiagala, it's a difficult one this time.
It's very difficult because I think Biden came in as an underdog. And he was expected that he would be bullied and he would be ambushed by Trump. And so they were waiting for the big fight. My reading of who won is actually is that Biden did fairly well. Just to survive, I think, the attacks, and to try at least to put a message through on what his agenda is. He struggled, but I think he did fairly well, despite all the attacks, despite the big ambush from President Trump.
Yeah.
So that's one of my readings at this point, that he did fairly well because he was not expected to do as well. He was expected to be trampled upon by Trump. Yeah, and I think just surviving the first debate, to me, is a very big win on his part.
Dr. Wekesa, I mean, the picture that Trump painted of Biden going into the debate as someone who's too old to take on the presidency, who is scatterbrained, who can't pull together a sentence. Many people saying if Biden, as the professor says, if Biden just manages to stay his ground, manages to put some real policies forward, he would do quite well, given the low bar that Trump had set for him. And I think he did that.
Certainly. I think to just add on to what Prof has just said, the additional point there is that Trump was also on the back footing because he's an incumbent. In 2016, he was on the attack. On this particular occasion, he was on the defense. And being on the defense means, kind of defending his position on tax, on COVID-19 and so forth. And here is a Biden who was on the attack. But also, as Prof actually does mention, it will appear a lot of strategy went into the Democratic candidates' performance, this morning, in the sense that, as we mentioned earlier, his body language spoke of someone who was focused on speaking to the American people, never looking at Trump very directly for too long. In the meantime, Trump was menacingly on the attack, focusing on Biden. So I think it was actually, as we almost agree, a survival tactic on the part of Joe Biden, an attack approach by Trump that actually almost fell flat.
Now, the question for me as well, and this issue came up in the latter part of the debate, Prof., is this issue that Trump brought up around election fraud. According to him, the very real possibility of election fraud come November the 3rd. I mean, if it so happens, let's say Trump does lose the election, and according to him, the only way that's possible is through election fraud. What is that going to mean for the U.S.?
It is going to be a sad moment if we have an election that is contested violently, and if we have an election that is not accepted. So I think we need to begin from the premise that we are hoping for the best, that the elections go very well, and that there is a very clear winner. Because the issue now is that if we have no clear winner, this case will have to go to the Supreme Court, or it will have to be contested in the streets, which will be sad for the United States. I think the problem here is that President Trump is trying to prepare his constituency for a loss. And that's why I think he's rubbishing the electoral system. He's making all these noises about he can't lose, or the mail-in ballots are a fraud and so on. So the language about the electoral process is very worrying, and which leads some people, therefore, to believe that he's scared of losing, and therefore the best way to prepare his audience is simply to say, I told you before that this was not going to be a clean election. And if it's not a clean election, then we have to do something about it. So that's really the danger. But I guess if we have a clear winner, and I don't know who the clear winner is going to be, then these issues won't even come back to us, to haunt us. But if it's a very close election, we face the danger of not just electoral violence, but also this issue escalating to the Supreme Court, and we really don't know who is going to be the next judge.
Indeed.
If Judge Amy Barrett is confirmed.
Yeah, we don't know which way the Supreme Court might be leaning at that stage. Dr. Wekesa, going into this debate, I'm just taking a look at the polls here. Joe Biden was in fact leading Trump in the national presidential polls with around 50%. Trump went into this debate with around 43%. Now, we know the issues around polls. Hillary Clinton knows them very well as well. But we've had a guest on this show also telling us that pollsters themselves have learned a lot since 2016. What's your take on the polls going into this debate?
No, I think the polls, in fact, ordinarily we'll be talking of the polls after the debate. But this is a debate that also, one, degenerated into a shouting match. And therefore, I'm not very certain how pollsters will approach it, given the fact of the unclarity of it. But more importantly, what will the polls do anyway? Because as has been mentioned repeatedly, this time around, mail-in vote as a mechanism, as an approach, is big time. So it will appear that even before we reach the next debate, many people will have actually voted already. In fact, because the mobilization of the Democratic Party end of things is vote now. You know, get out the vote and so forth. So much so that even if you have polls, people have already, kind of voted, and those that haven't have a position already. So to start with, polls obviously sometimes can be tricky, but more importantly, what is their meaning in a situation where there's voting prior to the the physical voting itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Gentlemen, that is where we leave our discussion on this Wednesday morning. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us and helping us to understand exactly what this first of 3 debates means for the elections in the US. That's Dr. Bob Wekesa and Professor Gilbert Khadiagala. They're both from Wits University's African Center for the Study of the US.